Whatever may be your birth sign, we are not of the same seed, although we are both the same breed. Together we're truly black power, power. Learning to trust by the hour, power. Loving our women now more, respecting what black is now for. And we've got love, 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 we've got love. Oh, sister of mine, I'm glad we both think it's now time to really show what we can do.
So perhaps we might begin by asking you how it was that you came to know that your father, who you had not seen in many, many years because he was living in exile in the south of France and you were here in the United States, and during that whole period, as I understand it, you didn't have much contact with him. How did you learn that he had begun to write and indeed had even completed this book? And what did he say to you with respect to urging you to find a home for it?
Well, what happened, I went to visit him in October of 2010. And he came out the room with this gigantic binder. And I said, well, what do you want me to do with this? And he goes, read it. And I'm like, okay. And so I open it up, and it's his memoirs of his time of the Panthers. And I speed read. But this book, I mean, it was like, God, how about that tall? And I sat there, and by 3 o'clock in the morning, I was done. And I said, oh, my God, this is my daddy. You know, you grow up, your parents tell you right and wrong, and what I was reading blew my mind, but I knew we needed it. And so I went and talked to him, because he stayed up waiting for me. And I go, well, here you go. And he goes, no. And I go, what do you mean, no? And he goes, here, you take this. And I'm like, oh, my God. One of the reasons was, I didn't speak French, so I only took a carry-on, and this binder was like weighing about 5 pounds. And I'm like, oh my God. But I was determined, so I said, okay, I'll bring it home. And I shopped around, and at the time, people just weren't interested. But I found someone, and he's a famous person. He's written screenplays and many books. And I met up with him. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm so excited, because he had written a book regarding the Panthers and the Weathermen. And so I met him in Austin. And, well, the next thing I know, I text him about 2 days later and say, well, what did you think of the book? And he goes, oh, it's fantastic. And I'm like, oh, great, because he's with a very famous agency. And so I waited, and I emailed again, and I emailed again, and I emailed again, and I did not hear from him. And I'm like, oh, no, this is not good. And so about 2 months passed, and I couldn't sleep anymore. And I have a girlfriend that works for a very famous law firm. And I said, would you take my book, because they do pro bono work, they get people off of death row. And I said, would you throw it in? And What happened was the head of the firm, John Kecker, came down, and they said it was like Moses when the seas parted. And he goes, I'll take that. And, well, he took my book. He wrote a letter to the gentleman, and within 7 days, I got my book back. And the first thing in the letter that John received was, oh, your reputation precedes you. So I was not worried. I got my book back. And what happened, he had written a book, John, and his attorney, Liz Hess, knew Steve. And she, in turn, gave it to Steve. And, well, here we are.
I'm glad we both think it's now time to really show what we can do. Improving black pride is now true. At last we've outgrown on the tongue. Devoted more time in the song.
And then I began to hear about a group over in Oakland called the Black Panthers with guns. I didn't know anything about them. Didn't know what they were talking about, but the word started going around a little bit. And finally there was an article in the San Francisco Examiner at the time showed a picture of Huey Newton standing up there with a gun. I know that was mind-blowing seeing that. So I started asking around, but nobody knew nothing about him, didn't know what he was. And then finally one day I walked into a job and somebody gave me the San Francisco Chronicle. There on the front page was a photograph of all the niggas at the state capitol with guns. Well, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I wanted to find them dudes with them guns. Because to me, with all the violence that blacks had been suffering from all this time, the idea of standing up and saying, we don't want no more of that. If you shoot at us, we're going to shoot back. That appealed to me. But I still didn't know anybody. But finally, I ran across a couple of young bloods that knew one person that was there in San Francisco that was part of the Panther Party. That was Emory Douglas. So we found somebody that knew him to get him to come and talk to us and whatnot. And we started buying Panther paper and studying that and everything. And so happened the first issue we got our hands on was one where there was an essay by Huey Newton talking about the correct handling of a revolution. And for us there in San Francisco, not knowing anybody, not really being into it, we didn't feel worthy of being in their company. We felt we put them in such high esteem. So we started trying to organize and learn a little bit amongst ourselves what was going on. And then by that time, Newark was breaking out, Detroit. We felt like the war and the revolution was on, and we was behind time, so we was working to catch up. And we wasn't going to go over there and meet with those people in Oakland until we felt like we deserved to be in their company. But in the meantime, through our relationship with Emory, we got Huey to come and talk to our group, and we really held him in high esteem and everything by all the stuff that they were doing in the streets, facing off the pigs with the guns and whatnot. So it was a little funny meeting him and seeing that little pretty boy with that little high-pitched voice. He didn't fit the image of this bad nigga that we had, and he talked so intellectual that we didn't half understand stuff he was saying, but still that didn't change anything. But he saw how we was organized amongst ourselves with our guns and giving training courses to people on how to use them and whatnot. So at that time, that was in summer of '67, he started asking us to deal with anything that came up there in San Francisco where people wanted Panthers.